So we know the importance of working with limiting beliefs, transforming them, transmuting the energy behind them, and the value that is to be found from embodying new beliefs that are aligned with the new versions of self and the energy we're moving into. We understand that. But what happens when the belief systems that we're working with are so deeply seated that we wouldn't even be able to identify them as limiting if we were close to them, because they are so ingrained to the ecosystem of our identity and the ecosystem of our day-to-day life, working experience, whatever have you, that shifting it would be actually detrimental to that particular ecosystem. Now, that's a really important question. I don't feel it gets talked about enough, and I feel that it's going to be really helpful for us to understand limiting beliefs as part of the influence in that ecosystem. So let's look at it a little bit more now. And I kept on getting an example of a friend of mine I have who's an audiology professional. She works with people's hearing and anything to do with the ears. And what she tends to do is extract sort of old substances, to old wax, to sort of illness and virusy stuff that has stuck in the ear so that the person can hear again well. And what she has told me is that in some cases, the substance is so deeply lodged in there, either because it's so old or is so kind of dense in the substance that any tool she uses are not able to take it out. And in that case, what she will do is she will use oil, which is apparently it's a done thing in her profession, in her industry. Audiologists will use oil to soften the substance so it's easier to extract. So I was thinking here, what would be the equivalent of that oil for our limiting beliefs so they're easy to extract? And the thing that came into mind was our capacity to investigate and our capacity to challenge and interrogate some of our existing belief systems. So I was looking at some of the areas that we could do that with, and I wanted to share with you. So here they are. First of all, we want to interrogate and we want to maybe kind of be more detectives around the belief systems and the limiting beliefs that have come to us from our early formative years and what has been passed down through our family, because our primary caregivers are essentially, the ones that get to influence and form most of who we are at this stage. And until we later on are able to start looking at that and the influence they had, and we start to kind of unpack that, we're not really going to create so much change in terms of from who they are to who we are. So in order to look at how much we're actually resonating with the belief systems we hold, we want to go back and revisit mom and dad. We want to look at what are their value systems around life, around money, around work, around important life choices. I want you to think about what those are for you, what it was for your mom and dad. And I want you to think, how much of those do you also carry to this day? How much of those you have taken on? And how much of what you've taken on is things that you're actually resonating and align with naturally, as opposed to you just ended up carrying them just because? And how much of those do they feel light and how much do they feel heavy? Anything that feels heavy, it tends to mean that either it doesn't resonate for us, it's not true for us, it doesn't resonate, we're not aligning anymore. And it could also mean that we are, it simply doesn't belong to us at all, right? Because it belongs to them, we've taken it on without questioning it. I know rational mind tends to want to think how, we want to rationalize everything. We want to give a reason. We want to give it a sort of a sense of, we want to connect things, why this is this and why this is that. But when it comes to a higher mind, that it's enough to know that if it feels heavy, we don't want it, and that we can release it. So that's enough of a reason. You don't need to have any other reason other than it feels heavy, it doesn't feel good, I don't need to be carrying this with me. So have a look at your mom and dad and look at how their beliefs around different aspects of living and life and choice and the important things. How much of that do you feel you carry right now in your life? Do they feel heavy? Do they feel light? Do they feel they belong to you? So a question to ask with that is, who does it belong to? When you ask that question and when you put it out to the universe picks up the energy and of the question, who does it belong to? And it will, if the thing that's coming up in relation to what you're reflecting on, the universe will send it back to where it came from and it won't stay with you. Okay, so who does it belong to? And it will start shifting the energy. It will take it to where it needs to go to. It won't be with you. Of course, we might need to ask that question a few times for a few different things, but the moment you feel something feeling heavy, you want to ask, who does this belong to? It might not even belong to you at all. Now, we've done this with our parents. We don't want to stop there. Yes, of course, that's really important that the primary caregivers, so they're the most formative in our lives. But the people around our family, the people who we grew up with, friends, extended family, we want to look at our current situation, our current friends and social circle. What are their belief systems or their influences? What kind of are we being fed by them? What kind of people are we surround ourselves with? On a very basic level, the vibration will feel, again, if we're surrounded by people who can feel very heavy in their energy, in their thinking, in whatever, of course, it makes sense that will have an influence on us to some extent. Then we want to look, how much do we open up space for these people in our lives, the people that can feel heavy, and just kind of equally, we could be surrounded by people whose energy feels expansive, whose mindset seems to challenge the kind of society's rules and kind of common belief systems, and they've kind of moved beyond that, and they're opening up to a space more of curiosity where they don't have a default around what society prescribes. And that can feel so much more exciting, so much more interesting to us, rather than feeling very sort of set in our ways through the way we believe and how we think about life. These people can help us feel a lot more open, a lot more curious, and a lot more expansive, and a sense of excitement around the possibilities ahead. So how much do we allow for people like that in our lives, that they will kind of shake that sort of status quo a bit in our thinking, in our ways of being, and will introduce new things that create that expansion, facilitate that, and makes us kind of want to challenge what we have going on. So bear that in mind. That's the other thing, because that's really important. Are we allowing space for whatever we want to align more with? Are we allowing people from that new vibration to currently have some space in our lives? Or are we just keeping it safe and simple with people that maybe, they don't hold necessarily a very explicitly negative beliefs, but they might feel very small, or they might feel very kind of the safety element is a lot stronger than the expansion element, right? And that means that in a way they can feel very safe connections, but not necessarily aligning us with so much more of the growth. And of course, it doesn't mean that because we want to align with new values that we have to let go of the old friends or we have to cut them out. In some cases, if there's toxicity, that might be necessary. But it might mean that, we just might not want to just surround ourselves with people like that. We want to have a little bit of a mix, yeah? Now, we looked at family, we looked at the environment of our friendships and acquaintances and people we surround ourselves with. Then we also want to kind of look at the value systems we currently hold and to see, do they still resonate with who we are? Do we resonate with them still? Because it might be that, those values feel a little bit outdated, and if something feels outdated because we start feeling a sense of not sure about this, or a sense of confusion. Sometimes it shows up as confusion, and I keep on saying that I think confusion is a wonderful thing because it shows that there's change coming, or this sense of we're not staying the same. And we can often give a negative interpretation to it, but actually confusion can be a very positive thing if we stay with it and if we allow for it to open us up to the new, right? And that does mean that we need to develop a bit of a sort of patience or a skill of kind of just waiting a bit. There's a sacred sort of waiting. There's a sacred pregnancy in that waiting of the new version of self sometimes. But it has this very interesting feeling again of like curiosity. Maybe it feels quiet or silent. Maybe it doesn't feel so certain. But actually, if we can find some interest in that new space where we not necessarily need to fill it up with our own ideas and our own ways of being, just stay open to see what it reveals to us. It can be a very, very interesting and helpful tool to align with this new. And I'm saying this because, again, our limiting beliefs are so ingrained to our identity and our ecosystem, especially as very educated, highly skilled women. We've done degrees, masters and PhDs, and we've developed our reasoning and our understanding on such a deep level. Yet that new version of self almost kind of requires us to hold all that loosely so that we can invite something new. And for so many people, they can feel so scared to do so because we've taken so long to build what we know so far. And for us to step out of that identity to stay open to the new, it can feel so scary. And I truly believe one of the reasons why so many men and women, they kind of are scared to evolve is because how strongly that is linked to the sort of to their core identity, personality identity, their views, their ideas, and in a way kind of holding those now loosely so that they are open to something new can feel very scary for people and something that doesn't make sense to the ego, to the mind, and to the people around us, right? So I remember when I was a practicing Buddhist as part of the Western Buddhist order, it was called at the time, for many years in London. And I loved what I learned and the seeds that were planted there through meditation and inquiry and the spiritual community, and I got so many benefits from it. But I do remember also one day just waking up when I was starting to get ready for to transition out of that environment and that spiritual influence in my life, the Buddhist influence. I remember once waking up and looking at the Four Noble Truths, which are the foundation of Buddhism, and they said, life is suffering is the first noble truth. And of course, life holds suffering, but it holds so much more than that as well, right? So much joy, so much expansion, so much happiness and joy and pleasure too. And so for some reason, because I was ready to sort of align out of that sort of environment, and I think I had received what I needed for a decade from my life, and I grew tremendously from it. But when it was time to transition, I remember just seeing the Four Noble Truths and thinking, that's not my default anymore. That's not my bottom line, and that's not these are not my Four Noble Truths anymore. And I felt like I can no longer align with this group of people, and I can no longer align with the teachings of the Buddha in that more personal way that I had immersed myself in. And it was really important understanding that that was out of alignment, because then if I had stuck through it, which was really recommended generally with spiritual practice, when you enter a religious group, to stick through it, I just didn't feel like sticking through it. But if I had stuck through it thinking that that was the way to go about it, I would have made myself very unhappy. And it was very interesting because the moment I left there, my next everything that I was meant to align with really became clear. It's really, there's a value in closing doors for the new ones to open, right? But when we fail to see that, it's going to be hard for us to make that alignment to the next thing if we bring that resistance to it. Because of course, it's down to us if we want to choose it or not. And equally with my professional environment, working with vulnerable people with complex needs under very victimized circumstances. People have gone through a lot in variety of settings. I've worked domestic violence and mental health and acute psychiatric services and disabilities. working with, advocating for these people felt really important to me. Coming from a patriarchal society, and working with women's empowerment felt really like the thing I wanted to do, until years down the line, again, it stopped being in alignment for me. And I didn't want to work with people in crisis anymore. And also didn't want to work with people from in that particular kind of space of being, which is the element of victimization. I wanted to work with people in a different stage of their development and healing process. And it was again important for me to understand that it probably would have been a much better work for other people who were still aligning with those values. You know, I needed to move elsewhere, work with different tools and in different capacities with people. And that was really, again, really important for me to identify that. So I would just say one great way to know when you stop being in the same level of alignment with something is that you start feeling confused. And I know people give confusion a bad rap, or it feels really uncomfortable to be in that confusion, but I promise you it's extremely valuable to get to that place, because it gives rise to a new version of self. And again, I use the analogy often of the farmer. He or she will plow the earth, right, before planting the seeds. So when the earth is dense and kind of tucked in, it's not going to have the same value for the seed when the earth is plowed and it just stirs everything up. That's when the soil is the most fertile. And it's the same with our confused state. It's like that plowing, right? Like things get like, we're not sure who we are anymore, what we are aligning with, you know, rather than seeing this as a kind of a negative thing, I see it as a positive, because it really is where your seeds for the new are being planted. You just need to water it, you need to be patient with it, and you need to cultivate that soil, your psychic soil, for that new version of self to feel held and supported in coming through, right? And so yeah, so really looking at our values, the causes we support, and the ideas that come with those causes, you know, do we still align with them? You know, what is that, how is that influence affecting us right now in the way we are growing and evolving? And also, what are we choosing to be fed from the outside world? The news that we hear, the programs we watch, the music we consume. I remember looking at a, you know, like a video clip, like a very dramatic 90s video clip. And Foo Fighters, it was a song I really like quite a lot. And I remember seeing so much drama, like this woman who seemed like to have mental health issues. And I feel like it's interesting that we kind of like look at that as a cool thing, right? The chaotic mental woman who can't get her shit together. And it seemed like to be really glamorized in that video. And I felt like I don't really like that, you know? So it's interesting. In the 90s, I didn't care. I loved all that. You know, you didn't think about that. But equally, the poetry, the music, even the news. I listen to the radio daily in the morning before going to school with my son. We love getting informed, but there's only so much I can listen to it. And then go about my day and do the things I need to do, because then all those images and things are going around my head. And they're not necessarily stuff I want to stick with, you know, I don't. So what are you choosing to be fed from the world around you? And really kind of understand that in order to release an older version of self, you know, that our current version of self is connected to so many situations, places, people, experiences. These are links, our beliefs linked to all these things. And in a way, the moment we start shifting them, those things will start shaking a bit, you know, and we want to create sacred space around that process. We want to be able to, you know, be prepared that things will shake a little bit. When things are tied to your current connections, to your professional life, those things will feel very hard to shift if your identity is so strongly linked to that and is so unable to stay in that curious place of possibility. And that curious place of possibility is, again, is something we need to cultivate, and it takes a level of skill to do, trust, faith, and it really helps to surround yourself with other people around this. So it's one of the reasons why my Alignment Academy, it's a year-long space. I mean, I incorporate energy reading as part of that. My certification program is part of those 12 months. So essentially the alignment space is like 8. But it's really so much more effective when you have that sacred space with the teaching around the new possibilities and alignment to the new version of self, especially when it comes through a higher self. It's so important. And so really kind of understand how right now your current life experience is very much really affecting the way your expansion goes, and know that you can be very influential, and it's down to you. You get to control how you navigate your expansion and your growth. And that does mean allowing yourself to create a little bit of a shake in your ecosystem, but doing so in a way that is safe for you, and create that sacred space so that you know how to navigate that, and you know to do so in a way that doesn't feel devastating, and it feels you can connect with the joy of the new possibilities and the new version of self that you're bringing forward, and to not be kind of overwhelmed by that. So I hope you find this video useful. I hope that you are open to yourself. And I suggest that even as an exercise for, like, say, the next week, I want you to start on your day-to-day basis, every single day, 7 days a week, to really start unpacking everything. When you think about something that you want to do, why are you thinking that? Where is this coming from? Why do you believe that needs to be the case? I want you to start unpacking and then ask the questions. Who does this belong to? Could this be coming from mom and dad? Is this really what feels light for me right now? And to start kind of really using that light and heavy as a barometer for yourself, and that who does it belong to as a way of like really navigating through the information that comes through and through the way you make choices, so that you can start really kind of sifting through the stuff that doesn't belong to you, to actually see what remains as you as part of that, and see what you want to do with that. So I urge you to do this. I dare you to do this as a little kind of exercise, a little vibrational play for the next week, and see what happens. And I'm curious to see if you do that and you find something interesting. Come back and tell me. I'd be curious to know what you found. So sending you so much love, and I'll speak to you soon.